Everyone, welcome to Lit Up. I'm George Lizos. I am a spiritual teacher, intuitive, and the author of Be the Guru. And I work with light workers, helping them to find and follow their life purpose. And this is my Lit Up Instagram show, bringing you fun and soulful interviews with spiritual teachers with the aim of tuning you in and lighting you up. And this is episode 7 with Beth Kempton, all about living a perfectly imperfect life, which I'm so excited about. Now, Beth Kempton is a Japanologist, a spiritual teacher, an entrepreneur, the author of Freedom Seeker, published by Hay House, and the upcoming Wabi Sabi, Japanese Wisdom for a Perfectly Imperfect Life. She's worked for UN agencies, global brands, NGOs all around the world, and she now runs 3 businesses all about living an inspired life. Today, she's joining us to chat about her new book, Wabi Sabi, which is a Japanese worldview about accepting change and the transience of life and how to apply that in all different areas of our lives. Welcome, Beth. I'm so excited to have you here. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for such a beautiful introduction. And hello to all of George's viewers, followers. And I think some of my friends are here as well from my account. So it's so lovely to have this opportunity with you. This is my very first Instagram TV and
exciting.
Love to learn. Always here to try something new. And I'm absolutely fascinated as to how you, with your background and your kind of take on life, what you've taken from the book, because I know that you've done some reading, and I'm just so interested how that kind of meshes with your view of the world.
Yes, I'm so excited to discuss about the book because I've read this book in about 2 to 3 days. It's one of the best books I've read in my life, definitely for a while. I loved your messages. I loved your storytelling. It resonated with me particularly because I'm a recovering perfectionist myself. So I've struggled with perfectionism my entire life. We've had a chat before about that. So it really spoke to my heart and encouraged me to be more in the moment. That's why I'm so excited to be chatting to you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us live. I want to encourage you to tap it out with hearts if you enjoy something, to leave us your comments, to ask questions, to be engaging. We don't want this to feel like an interview. We want this to feel like a conversation between friends.
Yes, so, with our Japanese tea. Everyone imagine you've got Japanese tea, right?
Exactly. I forgot mine.
I actually had English tea today.
Although having read the book, I know I have some excellent tips on how to enjoy and make my Japanese tea. So let me start with a basic question just to situate everybody in the topic of Wabi Sabi. What is Wabi Sabi and why is it important to know what it is in today's world?
Well, you've started with the most difficult question because the honest truth is when I set about writing this book, I knew that this concept was something really important in terms of what's going on in the world right now and how we think of ourselves and how we walk through the world and all of that. But I didn't know exactly what it was. And the reason I didn't know exactly what it was is because, as you'll know from having read the book, it's this amazing mystery. It's not in the dictionary, like the Japanese equivalent of the Oxford English Dictionary. The word wabi-sabi does not exist. And everybody who you talk to in Japan knows, they know in their heart what it is. And, it's a part of their life, but they can't articulate actually what it is. And it's so interesting because the word wabi-sabi has been used for a good, 10 years or so in the West to describe a particular look, like a wonky pot or, something with some kind of imperfect beauty. And I think we've come to associate it with what something looks like. And actually it's this much deeper, much more beautiful philosophy. And as you said at the beginning, more like a worldview. And it's also a feeling. It's the response that we have to a particular kind of beauty that reminds us of the true nature of life. The true nature of life from Zen Buddhism. I'm not a Buddhist, I'm not a Zen practitioner, but from my conversations with monks in Japan, drinking green tea in their temple, I've come to understand that it's very much rooted in Zen philosophy as well as the tea ceremony, and very much about this idea of everything in nature being impermanent. Everything is transient. Every single leaf and flower and tree and things you see outside, but also us, we are by our very nature not going to be here forever.
No.
We are not complete. We are not perfect. And that kind of blows your mind when you think that we are always changing, which means we are never the finished article, which means we're not supposed to be perfect.
Yeah.
And this crazy kind of chasing of perfection that we do and have come to think is what we should do actually is not our natural way of being humans on the planet. And that, for me, was such a revelation and really beautiful. So Wabi Sabi is definitely a couple of things. It's the philosophy and the understanding and the seeing of the world from the point of view that everything is changing, which means hold on, no, when the good thing's happening, make the most of it. When a bad thing happens, know it's going to pass, you know, all of that. And also, really importantly, and something I've not really seen written anywhere before, is the idea that it's this very human, intuitive, instinctive response to beauty, to a particular kind of beauty that reminds us of that truth, that everything is changing. So, for example, when you see autumn leaves falling off a tree and it's the cusp of the season, and you know that this, if you come back next week, that tree is going to be bare.
Different.
So you have to just, you know, take it in the moment. And that reminds you that also this season of your life will pass. Whether it's a hard one, whether it's an amazing time in your life, it's going to change. And you can either, you know, push against that, or you can go with it and say, I'm going to make the most of now, or I'm just going to breathe, kind of do the best I can to get through this moment. And then another moment's going to come. And it's really calming and a beautiful way of seeing the world, I think.
So Wabi Sabi is reminding us that everything's changing, everything's transforming, and so are we. So if this is it's a thing in our life, it's a concept in our life that we're so used to, or we're supposed to be so familiar with it. Yeah. Why the need to be perfect? Where do you think the need to be perfect comes from? Does it come from being human, or is it nurtured in a way? Is it nurtured by society? Or are we born with this need to have everything perfect, since we know that it is our nature to be imperfect, to change all the time?
You know what? My guess is that it came from the Industrial Revolution and the need to sell stuff and the need to tell people that they aren't good enough as they are. They need to own more. They need to know more. They need to be more. And all of that, you know, 20, 30 years ago, we would have said has come from television advertising and adverts in magazines and stuff like that. And also, of course, from our parents and teachers who are seeing those same messages. Yeah. But now we are very much in the age of this is social media. And, you know, social media is an amazing tool. Look, you're where you are, I'm where I am. We're in different countries. Having a
and we do that.
And, you know, I'd love to know in the comments, like, where are you all watching
from?
Yes,
let us know in the comments where you're watching from.
It's, you know, it's an amazing tool, and I'm so grateful in so many ways for social media. But the big problem with social media is that it sucks us out of the experience of our own life into other people's. And I think we spend so much time in other people's lives and not actually there, but just looking at them without playing a real role in it. Then we get completely distracted from the beauty and the richness that's going on in our lives right now.
It's creating FOMO, fear of missing out, in other words, and the need to constantly get more stuff to fill our life. And
exactly. So we've got, I'm just looking at so we've got America, we've got Canada, we've got Switzerland. I mean, actually, the lady who posted from Switzerland, I remember she came to an event I was talking at once.
Yes, it's Sonia.
It was amazing.
Sonia, she came to, was it Ignite?
Yes.
I think it was Ignite. That's where I met her as well.
It's just amazing. So I'm absolutely not saying let's get rid of social media and go back to the dark ages, but I'm just saying it's so important to be conscious about about how we're making the most of this time, which is a very short time on Earth, right?
And I wanna read something from the book Speaking About Stuff. You say, before we can beautify, we need to simplify and make the most of the space that we have. Now, in a world where, as you said, we're constantly encouraged to buy more stuff, to fill our lives with so much distraction, there is this need to declutter and to simplify our lives. However, the way I see things, decluttering has become such a buzzword and such a popular concept that people are becoming perfectionistic about decluttering.
Yes. So ironic.
I know I had read the Life-Changing Magic of Tithing about a month ago, and I just completely redone my entire house, decluttering it. But I caught myself, Beth, obsessing with decluttering and trying to find more stuff to throw away.
Yeah.
So, and I know in the book, you mention a more balanced way of using Wabi Sabi to declutter and simplify our lives and our homes. So what is the Wabi Sabi way of decluttering our lives and our homes?
Well, I just want to say that I love that you picked up on that, because that book by Marie Kondo, who is Japanese, you know, it's been a massive, massive international bestseller, and it has served a lot of people in an amazing way. You know, we all know by now, thanks to her, that decluttering can make a huge difference to how you feel. You know, your space is really important, and getting rid of stuff that either is to do with a version of your life you thought you should have and actually you need to let go of, or stuff that's kind of connected to old relationships, or any of that stuff. That's really, really good. But like you say, I think it's one of those other things that becomes an obsession and there's something else to beat ourselves up about. So the word that I use myself is soulful simplification, and it's really, you know, it's not get rid of everything and sit in a, you know, in it, if we're thinking Japanese here, you know, in a room with tatami mats and absolutely nothing else and one flower in the corner. That's not how we live, and that's not the point. And I, you know, if we're actually just moving house at the moment, we're packing up a lot of our stuff, and the rooms slowly are becoming, you know, clinical. They're just the color on the walls and the carpet and nothing else. And I don't want to live in a house like that, right? So for me, what this seeing the world and my own home through this idea of Wabi Sabi makes me think, okay, what can I treasure from my story so far? Because everything is changing, so we want to capture moments and memories of beautiful times that we've had. Also, how can we bring nature in, gifts from the forest and from the sea, you know, branches and leaves and seed pods and shells and these things that we find when we're out in nature. Because I saw today, I think it was Emily McDowell posted on Instagram, it's brilliant. Trees were meant to be looked at by being in the trees, not on your phone. Like, I can't remember what her exact words were, but it's true.
I love that.
It's calming to look in your phone at a picture of a tree, but it's much more calming to go and stand next to a tree, right?
Yeah.
You know, so those reminders, so the fact that we have to go outside into nature to get it and then bring it into our homes, and then we see it around ourselves, and we see, you know, the way that flower is slowly changing, and its petals are shriveling and then dropping, and it's just a very gentle, you know, reminder in the corner of your room. And if your room is full of stuff, you don't notice it, you don't see it. And I think so often that we put so much on display when we would better serve ourselves by not necessarily getting rid of it, but putting it away so the mind is calm. But also the things that we put out, we have carefully chosen so that they're supporting the life that we want to live, you know?
Yeah, so basically, just before we throw something out and become obsessed about decluttering, just connect to our heart and our soul and see if there is a soul connection there, if it brings us a sense of joy, therefore, to keep it in our house, rather than obsessing about throwing away all past memories.
Exactly, because the word Wabi Sabi actually was originally two words. I mean, the word wabi and the word sabi still exist as two words in Japanese.
Yeah.
The wabi side, which has very, very strong connections to centuries-old tea ceremony, is all about the beauty in simplicity and austerity. And that, you know, if you read in the book, it will tell you exactly what that connection is. But that side of it is really important. You know, treasuring things that didn't necessarily cost you any money, or this whole thing about upcycling. All of this is beautiful. You don't necessarily have to go and buy something new, right? It's like, how can I make the most of what I've got? And then the other side, the sabi, is about the beauty of age. So you want to be, so that encourages you to appreciate
embracing that.
Yes, and you know, that lovely piece of furniture that you inherited from your grandma and those kinds of things. It's seeing those things with fresh eyes and saying, how can I use these in my space to build my story?
Yes, beautiful. And speaking of nature, by the way, I want to touch on my favorite chapter of the book, which was chapter 3, Living with Nature. I love this chapter because for so many years while I lived in London, I was away from nature, and so many people who live in megacities have this disconnect from nature because there's not much of it there. So what are some simple techniques we can use, or some processes we can and routines we can insert in our lives to start living more with nature, even if we live in a megacity like New York or London or Tokyo.
You know, it's so funny because this idea of forest bathing or forest therapy.
That was my next question. Tell me about that.
That's something I touch on in the book. But this is one of those buzzwords that's become really trendy in the last year or two. And the reason I think it's become such a big thing is that forest bathing, which is kind of like sunbathing, you know, exposing you, not exposing yourself in the forest, exposing yourself to the forest in the same way that you would to the sun to get its beautiful energy. This idea of spending time in nature is nothing new. We have done this for as long as there have been humans walking this planet and as long as there have been trees for us to walk in, right? So we know deep in our bones that nature is good for us. And so many of us are drawn to it without even understanding why. So forest bathing in itself isn't really a new thing, it's just a word. But why it's become so popular, I think, is because the Japanese have found scientific evidence that actually spending time in nature, particularly around certain kinds of trees, has very specific measurable health benefits. And so the scientific community has suddenly become incredibly interested. And there's some amazing research going on in Japan and Korea about this. And so without going into too much detail on that, I think what it's done is just put scientific evidence to something that we all knew. And it is difficult in a megacity to find nature for sure. And I think there are different ways of doing it. You can just make the choice to make your journey to work, for example, via any green space that you can find. You know,
a park.
Yes, a park. Your lunch hour, what are you doing with that? Even just getting outside. Of course, if you can be in a park, that's amazing. But even just walking in the air and feeling the wind on your skin and this, you know, making sure that you realized it was raining or it was sunny, those kind of connecting with the seasons wherever you are makes a huge difference because it helps you track time, as we've been talking about. You know, everything is transient, and really being in tune with the seasons makes you reconnect with the food that is fresh at that time of year, as well as how, you know, if you're feeling a bit, you know, like you're in a slump, then maybe it's because it's winter and your body wants to hibernate, and that you kind of give yourself a break when you really get in rhythm with the seasons and all of that. So in a city, I would say give yourself opportunities to connect with the seasons, and that may well include trying to sometimes maybe leave later or earlier so that you get to see the daylight, you know, in the winter, those kinds of things. But also planning, you know, can you have a walking meeting in a park? Those kind of things. And what can you do with your time after work? Can you actually take yourself on a small adventure in the evening, you know, and go off to your local wood or sit by a river or take a walk along the sea? And it is so much easier, I think, than we think. And there are also things you can do. You know, you can get like cypress oil and have that in your infuser. You can have, you know, plants in your home. There are so many things you can do. It's just, I think, kind of switching yourself back onto that and saying, how can I do this? Because it's very easy when you live in the countryside. You have to make more conscious effort, don't you, in the city?
So
what do you think?
Well, when I lived in London, every single lunch break, I would go to Hyde Park and meditate because it was my only way. But what I realized that nature was in the city. It was just a matter of me tuning my attention and turning my attention to nature and noticing that, as you just said. Therefore, walking through Oxford Street, for example, instead of looking at the people and feeling overwhelmed, noticing the beautiful green spaces that are everywhere along the street, and just placing my attention onto those kind of things just instantly connected me to nature, or even staring up at the sky.
And looking for that tiny flower that's poked its way through the crack in the pavement and marveling at that for a moment. All of these things. I'd love to know, anyone who's watching, how do you find nature in your day? What do you do? Is it on your doorstep? Do you have to go? Do you have a special way of going out into nature during your working week? Would you make it the most of your weekends?
Let us know in the comments. Anna, Genevieve, Beth, Sonia, we're looking forward to hearing from you. Okay, and I want to read something more, Beth. You said in the book about Zen. People think Zen is all about calmness and tranquility and living in some blissed out state of good vibes. But actually, it's about how you face your challenges, and happiness loneliness, very difficult emotion. And that really touched me because the spiritual community nowadays is all about being positive and positive affirmations and avoiding negative emotion. It almost bullies and judges negative feelings. So how do we find a balance between being positive and having a positive outlook on life, but at the same time, keeping it real?
First of all, I want to say that's one of my favorite quotes in the book. It's not my writing. It was from an interview I did with a deputy head priest of Shunkoin Temple in Kyoto, Reverend Takafumi Kawakami. And yeah, it was so important to me that he said that a lot of people really misunderstand what Zen is, and that it really is, and he was very specific about this, it's about accepting the actuality of life. He said, it's not the reality of life, because who knows what reality is, and that's a whole other Zen conversation. But he said about the actuality of life. So, and I think that the clue is there. It's about what is actually going on, and trying to feel your emotions, but separate your emotions from your decisions and actions, which is why being able to slow yourself down and notice what's really, really going on, and recognizing that, okay, let's say, for example, something bad's happened, right? We know that thing has happened. It may be that you can't do anything about the fact that that thing has happened, right? For me, something that's really helpful to do is in that moment, actually forget about the thing that's happened and just say, what's going on in this moment where I am? What sounds can I hear? What can I see? What can I smell? Just kind of really pulling yourself into the physicality of where you are. And then that makes it a lot easier for you to then kind of put the emotion to one side and say, okay, what are the facts of what is happening? You know, someone's just told you that they're leaving you and your relationship is going to break up, or this, you know, whatever bad thing has happened. Like, what are the facts of this? The fact is they've just walked out the door and they're not coming back. You know, of course you could spin into an emotion, you know, and that's nothing wrong with that. It's fine to do that, but it's really helpful if you have the tools to say, okay, what are these facts? And then knowing that the next thing is the new beginning, and that this is the next thing. Everything changes, and you can decide, okay, maybe I couldn't do anything about what's just happened, but I can do something about my very next step, and the next step, and the next step. And I think this is all to do with the idea of transience, because it feels terrible. And let me cry and scream or laugh or whatever it is.
Which is fine, yeah.
Which is fine, but also move on from that to,
exactly.
To the next stage of thinking, which is I have the strength and the capability and the sense of person to go, I'm going to choose my next action. Yeah, it really helps with that.
So accepting what is actual, what is real in our lives, spending some time to express the negative emotion, but then realizing it's not permanent. Everything changes in the same way that all positive things change eventually, or negative things will change eventually into something positive. Yeah,
and it's true with small things as well. So if I give you a snapshot into what's going on in my house right now.
Yeah.
About 3 hours ago, I was desperate for a shower because our boiler has broken, and we were waiting for a plumber who wasn't coming here for who knows what reason, because this is often the way it happens, right? Boxes everywhere. My children, because the plumber hasn't come, they have to sleep in a different room, and they don't want to go to sleep, and all these things going on. And then Instagram decided to do an update just before we come on air, and all these things going. You could just go into a really stressed situation, but none of that changes anything.
Yes.
So all I could do is go, right, this is happening. I've got no shower. I might not have a shower before I have to go and talk to George. I'm going to go and get a shower at my brother's house and have a nice cup of tea and then come back. It sounds so simple, but it's so different to going, oh, I've got no shower. What's going on?
Yeah, just freaking out.
Yes, and then finding so many other things going wrong because one thing after another goes wrong, right? Like the bathroom cabinet door just fell off, so I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror to do my makeup.
You look fabulous.
It's really interesting because in researching this book over the past few months, my life feels so much calmer, and I'm so much better at just going, let it go. It's fine. It's fine. You can, and this is my new thing is. You can only do what you can do. You can prepare, and that doesn't at all mean don't prepare for things. It doesn't mean just, never strive for anything. But it means at this moment in my life, I can only do what I can do, and I'm going to show up as best I can. And that's what we can ask, isn't it?
And just surrendering.
Yes.
And that leads me to my final question. That's a perfect lead up, which is, if there was a single advice you could give to someone who's a recovering perfectionist or suffering from perfectionism, because it can become pathological if you're suffering from OCDs, which I did earlier on in my life. But for someone who's trying to recover from perfectionism, what would be your single advice from the book?
Well, I don't want to give advice to specific medical conditions.
Not medical, but
OCD
like,
is
yes.
one of those. But
yeah,
I think if you really are, you really obsess about being perfect in every area of your life. I mean, seriously, I would say read the book, because I think it will help you. But I think
definitely, it did help me, by the way. Yeah,
like, oh,
100%.
So I think it's definitely, excuse me, trying to understand. It's worth spending some time thinking, where does that perfectionism come from? What am I trying to prove, and who am I trying to prove it to? And does it really matter? And sometimes it is worth doing your absolute best, but always reminding yourself that comes at a cost, because you cannot physically, as a human being with 24 hours in the day, do your absolute best in every single area of your life, right? If you're writing your very best book, you're doing your very best launch for your new business, all those things, you probably are not going to have a perfectly clean house, right? You just can't do the best in everything. And understanding that and thinking, okay, I'm going to allow myself to have my perfectionist tendencies in one particular area that really matters to me. And then I'm going to think about what I need to where I need to let it go.
Love that.
So that I don't have to push it away. I can say, let's put that amazing commitment in one area of my life. And then remember, this is so important, you are perfectly imperfect just as you are, and you are not supposed to be perfect. So perfectionist tendencies can be incredibly valuable, but if you are trying to make yourself perfect, it's going against your nature. So just allow yourself to be who you're supposed to be.
So realizing we're not Mary Poppins, and then focusing our attention to something specific rather than overwhelming ourselves with having to be perfect everywhere. Thank you so much, Beth. That was so valuable, and I'm sure everybody got so much value out of this. Please tap it out with hearts if you enjoyed this interview. Now, Beth, let people know where they can pre-order the book. I know it comes out in 2 days.
It comes out on Thursday. It's very exciting, although I have been seeing some pictures of people picking up in foils in London and in shops in Sydney. So I think some people have been sneaking onto the shelves early, but it officially comes out on Thursday. And if you pre-order it before Thursday, you can order that from anywhere, and then you go to my website, to bethkempton.com/new book, and you put your receipt information in the little form on that page. You can get access to some free coaching with me online live later in the year, and we are going to be going through some of these topics in a lot of depth in a group coaching scenario. So today's been amazing that we can have this chat and all of this, and I'm going to be taking a lot of your questions around these kinds of things, so we're talking about it in your specific situation. So I have been reading the comments that have been coming through, and I'm so glad to hear that lots of you are going to be reading it, and also just the way that you're trying to embrace your own imperfection already. It's beautiful.
Exactly. And everybody, if you go to my stories, I've got a swipe up function there. So if you see the story where I mentioned the book, a picture of the book, you can swipe up, and that will take you straight to Beth's website, where you can pre-order and get that free coaching that she just mentioned. Beth, thank you so much for writing this book. It has helped me tremendously, and I can't wait to see it reach the world and change so many lives. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this. I certainly did. And I can see that everybody did enjoy with the cards coming out.
Thank you for having me on the show, and for the amazing work that you're doing in the world, George, as well. The world absolutely needs it.
Have a beautiful rest of your evening, and enjoy packing.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.